All right, so there was a question that came up that Daniel was curious about. Well, what if you make it solid? How do you make it solid? How do you subtract two solids? Um, it's very similar in how you subtract, because it's basically going to be a solid difference, but you're going to do a solid that has depth and thickness to another solid that has depth and thickness. So I'll get you there, and then we'll replug this in. So let me just disconnect these. Disconnect that. Turn this on. So for the overall surface, right, this is going to become our main surface. So I'm going to show you guys, now we're starting to get to a point where, you know, all the stuff is stretching really, really far across the workspace. So I'm going to give you guys some visibility tips. Something that I typically do with references in little, you know, like references that are going to happen again and again and again, is I create duplicate information like this, so that this particular one is my main surface, and I can rename it. So I'll go to this and I'll say this is going to be called the reference surface. So that way I can actually change the wire display on this to be hidden and move it down here so it's a little bit more clean. Does that make sense? It's a visibility thing. I usually make like a big group up here with a bunch of things. So this is a reference surface that now can be connected via a wireless connection. So I rename this one to reference surface 2. That way, oh, you know what, I missed one. Go like this, and that'll go into there.
How many?
What's that?
How many reference surfaces?
I usually just keep one extra one here like that. Oh, you know what? I'm sorry. No, you don't need that one. I lied. You can just do that. Just one. One extra. You want me to show you the process of creating it new? Go to params, say surface, call this one reference surface, and then set it. Right, so that's the same thing that I did with the original surface reference. Only now I make a copy of that like this, and I can set it to a wireless display. So I right click it, I go to wire display, and I say hidden. So now I can move that anywhere. Like I can move it up here to the surface difference, which is what I made it for. Except I'm not going to do that one. I'm going to do this one. Like that. See? So now it, even though it's over here, this is one packet of information. Oops. I'm going to put that there. This one I'm going to put down here. So now we have, this is just a way for me to keep the packages of geometry together so that you can parcel it out and understand how each of the little bits and pieces are working. Does that make sense? Why you would want to do that? Because once these things start to get really, really long, they get really confusing. You don't have to do that right now. Maybe it's just going to confuse you at this point, but I'll go back. Some of you can use that. Most of you probably won't. So let me go back to the original case. All right, so this is what we had. Sorry. So we've got a reference surface that we're going to use to actually create a solid that's going to feed into the surface difference. Then we also have the subdivisions of the surface that have been reduced that we're also going to create solids with to subtract. But the thing we need to do is figure out, well, how do I make a solid? So I'll leave that up there. And to create a solid, the simplest form is just to do an extrude. So I go to surface and I go to freeform and I go to this one right here. It's called extrude. So what extrude needs, it needs the base surface, and it needs a distance, or sorry, a direction with magnitude. So that's where it gets a little bit confusing. What you need for your direction is actually to find a surface normal, and this is a new term. I'm debating, do I actually want to show you normals yet? Maybe I should. It's kind of important, so we're going to, well, hold on. Let me see if there's an easier way to do this first. Probably not. Yeah, probably not. All right, so now is the time to show you that. All right, so we're going to do extrude. It's under surface freeform. So make sure you drop that in. Okay, and then so we need the base profile surface, which is this, and then we need a extrusion direction. So we could just tell it, and I'm going to show you the simple version first, and then I'll show you how to do the normal. So the simple version here is if you look at your perspective view, the way that it's lying down on the ground, we have it going in roughly the X and Y, but the extrusion is going to have to go in the Z direction, right? So that's the opposite direction of where it lays down on the ground. So we need to say, basically, if you go under vector, that's where you establish directions now. Vector, vector, and we say unit Z. Plug that in. Notice how it did something. And if you zoom in, now it looks like it's kind of solid. So this F is a factor, which basically passes through a numerical value that's tied to that direction. So this is a world Z vector, right? It has direction and magnitude, if you remember from physics class. And then it says I'm going to extrude that surface in the Z direction by a value of 1. So if I want to change that, I need to add a slider. So I say 0 is less than, yeah, let's make it 2. Why not? Less than 5. So I did 0 less than 2 less than 5. I can't imagine we're ever going to have a 5-foot thick wall. It's probably only going to be a foot or two, but I'll plug that in anyway, just so you can see. All right, I'm going to pull that way back, pull this forward. So here's where it's going to start kind of tying into a couple of different things. We have the package that created the subtractions. I'll name this appropriately. Subtractions. Then we have up here, we're now working on the volumetric ones. That might actually have to change. So we have to do the same thing with the subtractions now, except that they must be at least as thick or thicker than the original wall that you're going to subtract it from. The easy way to do that now is use that circular reasoning, right? That referential data input, and just plug it into a new extrusion. So if I copy this extrusion down, and I add these surfaces in and replace it, now I've got two sets of surfaces that are being extruded exactly 2 feet. Does that make sense? Yes. It does not make sense? Well, let's do the subtraction and then maybe you'll see. Okay, so it's really, really quick after that point. You just grab your solid difference and then you plug in one extrusion, you plug in the next extrusion, and then turn everything off. And there you have your solid. I don't know what layer it's on. 35-foot solid. Okay. So that is essentially how you create the solid version of this extrusion and subtraction.
You just extruded your original surface, and then you made those panels or the windows larger or thicker than that extruded surface.
At least as thick, yes. Otherwise, if it was not as thick, what you're going to get is basically just, where am I here? That's for this one. You're basically just going to get a subtraction that's inside of the surface.
Like on the bottom side.
Yeah. It's like a carve out rather than a full penetration. Okay. So that's why it's smarter to just put the same Z factor into it. Okay, so I know that, that might be a little bit much to take in right now, so I'll walk around and help you guys out with it, but I think it's a relatively simple concept, right? Recapping again, we take the original surface as a full plane, make it 2 feet thick. We take the subtractive surfaces, the ones that we're going to use to subtract with, and extrude them the same amount. And then you just plug it into the solid difference. So the only thing new that I showed you here is an extrude command, which is simple, and this thing. So the unit Z. All right, so let's figure this out before we move on to normals.